Hello and welcome everyone. There are four ways to become wise. One is to live a long life. Two, to travel through many lands. Three, to read good books. That's the easiest. Four is to converse with good friends. Now that's the nicest. And my promise to you is that I want this to be an interactive session. Your input is going to be highly valuable. You're going to learn a lot about this kind of remote doesn't need to be disconnected from each other as well as from metaphorically from the room. So my name is John Cassidy-Rice. I have the pleasure to be your host for this training. So we're looking at this idea that being remote doesn't mean to be disconnected. And I'm going to make a couple of cases. One of those cases is to think about actually some time alone is important. And we're going to look at two extreme examples of those. Then I'm going to make a case for the phone. I think we all know that the phone can be very powerful as a communication tool. And we've all getting used to this video. And I'm going to talk about the difference between when to use the video conferences and when to use the phone. And then we'll look at some key points to sort of maybe go deeper into the conversation. Now, Emily, she was a very reclusive person in her life. In fact, there was only ever one photo taken of her at the age of 18. Near the end of her life, she did become a recluse, pretty much lived all by herself. She did pass at the age of 55, and when her family and friends went in and started to sort out the house, they opened these drawers and they discovered some of the most eloquent poems that touched on every facet of being a human being. The question becomes, how could a recluse write poetry that touched on every facet of being a human being? Well, the poet's name was Emily Dickinson. And here's my thinking about it. We have hundreds of thousands of receptors designed to take the outside world in. That pales into insignificance when we realize that we have billions of neurons. We can make more connections inside our head than all the stars in the known universes. You can have more connections inside your head than all the cars and all the roads in all the world today, including the M1, even in lockdown. You can have more cars, you can have more learners understands inside our heads than all the individual grains of sands in all the beaches and deserts in the world today. So we are equipped to live a life, an inner world, much more than we are an outer world. Excuse me. Emily Dickinson. So our imaginations, which is another way of saying mindset is going to be important when we're in these situations. Nelson Mandela came out of prison, spent a lot of time in isolation there. Made a huge difference in the world. And he was asked about his time in prison. And he said, I come out more mature. So I think there's a great opportunity for all of us to grow and expand from this. There's going to be a lot of positives that come out of this. And what's been wonderful, we've seen so many people come together to support each other and actively looking for solutions. Oops, tech not working. So I have a question. This is where we start to interact a little bit. So what are some of the, oops, that was a doorbell. I think that was when I was on the stand, so let me see if I can quickly get rid of that. So question for you guys. What are some of the things that you've seen that's worked, that has helped people feel connected, whether it's in the workplace or at home? So type in the chat box and we'll share some of those ideas. So I think it's important that, as we're already doing, is share those great ideas. Icebreakers, yes, icebreakers are fabulous. And it's one of those things that sometimes we forget to do. Can I repeat the question? Yes, I can. So let's share some of those good insights that we've already had. So where have you seen some good practice of how can people feel connected remotely? Sharing photos, habits, and interests. And I think one of the things that's happened is that really been getting insights into people's lives and very humanized. Even though we can have these background things, we've seen spot interests in people's lives, absolutely. And more polls, yeah, any type of interaction rather than passive learning, just like we're doing now. More caring attitude and looking into people's lives. And on the whole, one of the things that's happened that's been wonderful is that more caring attitude. Turn the webcams on. Yes, absolutely. So feel free to turn them on. I would love to see smiling faces. So, oh, look at that. Oh, fabulous. Hi, guys. Thank you ever so much. So Skype, Zoom. Yep, Skype and Zoom are great. And we're going to have a kind of look at the phone as well. Employees sharing weekly epic fails and epic successes. Oh, yes. It's wonderful to hear about successes, but also we learn so much from epic fails as well. So and what all these suggestions are doing is being very human. Scheduling time with the team so we don't talk about work, so that we're having small talks at work. Yes, it's kind of like the water cooler, which is an American phrase, I know, but that effect where you just have those little chats, there's little interactions. So can we foster more of those? Being able to chat with colleagues at the touch of a button can be great, but it also gives you some challenges, the ability to chase your consistencies for info, etc. Online lunchtime book clubs. Okay, yes, so being able to connect with people at touch of a button is great, but sometimes that can be distracting and get in the way of workflows. So things like on lunchtime book clubs, share those ideas. Wonderful suggestions. Great stuff. Virtual coffee breaks where people can drop in for non-work chats. Yes. What all this is about is communicating. So what is it that you think people's missing? What are people missing from this online interaction? So share some of those ideas as well. Body language, yes. So, and that can be actually interpreted in various different ways. The body language from the screen, as you see, I got fed up sitting down, so I've managed to do it so I can stand up and move around. So a bit of body language for you. Feedback, yes, feedback, the breakfast of champions and not meaties. I think sometimes that feedback loop where we pick up on lots of different types of information. Small talk, laughter, yes. Again, and also I think sometimes people are missing going to that deeper level of a conversation. Cheeky jokes. I would normally ask to share the jokes, but if it's a cheeky joke, I think we have to be a little bit careful here. The unexpected, absolutely, and that's from Sophie. Now, the reason I'm probably not doing everybody's name is I'll have to share something with you very personal, because you're probably going to find out anyway, that I had the pleasure of being dyslexic. So when I was at school, they gave me that lovely label of being dyslexic, which, when you think about it, is a hard word to spell. Even if you can spell, that's a hard word to spell. And I also think they asked dyslexic, how do you spell that? And they went, I'll give it a go. I went, D-Y, there's an X in there somewhere. So my dyslexia shows up in a couple of ways. One is spelling, which is quite common. The other one is in pronunciation of names for some strange reason. So, but yes, the unexpected. And the unexpected, I think, is really important. And it's the area that I was going to go to next. So we live in a society that likes the video, we like the visual part, but I'm going to talk about the phone. But I think I probably need to make a case for that. Oh, and I was like, not easily distracted by your kid, but by your kids around. Absolutely. I've got 5 children, by the way. So now the reason you have children, and this is just between you and I, when you come on courses like this and you need people to practice on, well, that's why you have children. Only reason, really. I'm only joking. All right. So let's have a look at, because all this is to do with communication. And that last point, apart from the unexpected, I think is a vital point as well. So whenever we communicate, that information, especially if we're at work and working remotely, we want people to make a decision on what somebody's just said. That information needs to arrive at the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is where somebody makes a decision to act on what you've just said. If that information, that communication doesn't arrive at the prefrontal cortex, they can't make a decision on what you've just said. Now, behind that, you wasn't expecting this, behind that is coordination of action. So if I make a decision to walk over to the laptop, which is in front of me, and press the button to advance the slide, that's prefrontal cortex stuff, that's a decision. I now coordinate that action, so I essentially see myself doing that in my mind. Probably not consciously, it's now starting to go unconscious, but that information is being practiced in my mind. It's also where working memory resides, just behind the prefrontal cortex. It's the executive, which makes a decision based on what the prefrontal cortex has said, should this information be stored at a deeper level. It's also the visual sketchpad, where I actually see myself doing the next thing. And also the auditory loop is rehearsed just behind the prefrontal cortex. And the auditory loop practices sound. You know when you go to Disney World and you go, what's this small, small world ride all about? And you go on this little ride and you're bobbing along and you've got, here's a small, small world, da, 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 da. And then for months afterwards, all that's going through your head is, here's a small, small world. Da, 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 da. So that's the visual of the auditory loop playing there. And I know some of you just got that out of your head. Connected to that is initiation of action. So prefrontal cortex made a decision to go over and press the button. See myself do it, and now initiating that action. I'm always pleased when that works. Tactile sensation. So if I feel the shirt, cotton on my shirt, that information is fed up my arm and is processed just along here. That all feeds into mental images. This is part of the brain that, when you daydream, lights up. And we spend a lot of our time daydreaming. So this part of the brain is to do with that daydreaming. And it actually uses a lot of different sensors coming together there. Visual cortex. The information goes in through the eyes, goes all the way through the brain, and is processed the furthest way from the prefrontal cortex. Police have challenge with eyewitnesses because they cannot agree on what they see. The reason being is short-term iconic memory. Short-term iconic memory only lasts for up to 1 second before it's wiped clean. The brain itself is updating visual memory 1/10 of a second constantly, which is a huge amount of data to process. So every second just clears it. So by the time you need to remember what you've just seen is important, it's already left your short-term memory, your visual memory, and your imagination fills in the missing information, what it thinks it saw. All that information feeds into visual short-term storage. Sound. Sound is seductive to us as human beings. Stephen Pinkman says, we are uniquely gifted to make complex meaning out of sound. Sound is the first sense to develop in the womb. It's on 24 hours a day. Even when you're sleeping, you're monitoring all the sound around you. It's also the first sense you lose when you die. Sound is intrusive, and you know it's intrusive because when you're in your car and you're driving around and you're getting to a point where you need to find somewhere and concentrate, you always turn the radio down or off. They spent a fortune to find out where sound was processed in the brain, and they discovered it was just above the ear. But if you look at that blue area, all of that is given over to sound, storage of sound. All eyewitnesses can agree on what they heard. The reason being is short-term auditory memory rattles around for up to 5 seconds. So this is why when you were at school and you were daydreaming and nobody was paying attention, and then suddenly the teacher picked up and went, Sophie, what did I just say? And you went, oh, you said this. And the teacher goes, oh, how did you know that? And you're going, how did I know that? I wasn't paying attention. That's because you can retrieve it from your short-term memory. In 1824, in Germany, Warnecke discovered Warnecke's area. This is about here. It names things. So if I got a ball of fluff in my hand and it's got whiskers and it's purring, it's this part of the brain that goes, kitten. 5 years later, in France, Broca discovered Broca's area. Broca's area is here. Why is it important? Did we notice that it's in the green section, which is coordination of action? Part of Broca's area's job is to coordinate the throat, the larynx, the lungs, and the diaphragm so that we can speak. It also processes verbs. Why is that important to know? Because Broca is the gatekeeper to the prefrontal cortex. Yes, there's an uptight little gatekeeper monitoring anything anyone ever says, and if you're predictable, have you heard it before? Broca says, I'm switching off. I'm not paying any attention to what you've just said. So if I start to tell you a joke and you can predict the end of the joke, Broca says, heard this joke before, switching off, don't need to pay attention. If you suspect your children have stopped listening to you, that's because you become predictable. Anything that's predictable. So their Broca's area go, mum and dad always says this, so I don't need to pay attention. Who seems to think there's a routine to Zoom and team chats? They tend to be predictable. So the danger of that, Broca's saying, I kind of heard this before. Let me go and wonder, do something else a bit more interesting. So when Sophie says we're missing that unpredictability, it is important to us. We are strange as human beings. We like structure for sure. But after a while, structure becomes boring, mundane. We want something that surprises us within the structure. Something that, so if you can delight Broca, surprise Broca, you'll have a yellow brick road to the prefrontal cortex. Which is a lot of information, but one of the things I think is really important here is that we look at the map of the brain. How much does the brain put over to sound? I think there's a great opportunity here. Any questions about anything we've just covered here? So type them into the chat box, or any observations. And Kay, feel free to do any cheeky jokes as well. Yes, so Susan's saying, interesting point about Zoom structure versus mundane. Good food for thought. Yeah. And remember, one of the things I also said, we do respond to structure, but within the structure, if we can be unpredictable in some way. So initially, that unpredictability of Zoom was the backgrounds, people having those lovely backgrounds. And so I can see Susan's got a lovely beach behind her, which is just absolutely fabulous. And they were unique, they were surprising, they delighted us. So if your brain gives more space to sound, is that a good reason to do podcasts? Why they could work well? Yeah, so podcasting is interesting in how we process sound. So the way to learn through sound is often to be doing other things. So if you listen to audiobooks, podcasting is great, especially for keeping in with your teams and keeping up to date. And I think one of the growths of podcasting is that you do other things while you're listening to it. So they're great for listening while you're driving, walking a dog, washing up, doing other things while you do that. What they're not great at doing is sitting, for me anyway, is sitting down and just listening to them. So that's an interesting thing. That's that connection between movement and listening. So thank you for that. So thank you, Claire. Susan says, in the northeast of England, so towards the beach, in the northeast of England, that's such a lovely beach. I think this matter of the brain is missing the emotional element, although that might be a complicated matter. Yeah, there's something slightly going on because there's many ways we can approach the brain. So from emotional, what's his name? It'll come back to me. But the idea between the reptilian, mammalian, and the cortex, and I think it's Denison. So I hear better when I do something with hands, yes. So if we can come across very emotional, so the reptilian brain, you probably come across this. This was some work done in the 1960s. Reptilian brain is where information goes to first in this particular model, and is essentially going, oh my God, is it going to attack us? Is it food or is it a love interest? So, and if it decides that everything's safe, we're not going to be attacked, it then passes on to the emotional, basically mammalian, which is the emotional part of the brain. So a slightly different model. Good, fabulous. So I'm about to start doing some events, learning events with teams, and I'm worried that people might find them difficult to adjust to. And my thinking of now going through unpredictability of what to expect might work in my favour. Yes, so if you're going to start introducing teams, one of the things I would suggest that you do is create a good structure and have shifts and changes. So you want unpredictability within the structure. So for example, what would be great here, my preference would be to have 2 camera angles. So if you can change from one screen to another screen, put different colors up, have different people involved, so keep it moving. If you've ever watched a movie from the 1950s, it seems very slow, especially some of the Westerns, because they pan across landscapes. You watch a modern movie, and you can count up to 15 to 20 seconds before there's a scene change. Whereas if you watch modern movies, you won't get to 5, or TV programs. So next time you're watching a movie or TV program, notice to keep your interest and keep your engagement, every 5 seconds, there's something happening on that screen, which we don't seem to incorporate as much. We don't need to be Hollywood movie styles, but have that concept of change and shifts every so often. But watch a movie, watch a program tonight, and notice that you can't count to 5 before they change the scene, change the angle, change who's on screen. So that's creating that unpredictability. Online learning, good practice to keep changing techniques. How many people engage in about every 3 minutes? Yeah, so there's a lot of professionals here, and a lot of people realize that online training, to keep that engagement shorter is normally better. So fabulous. Keep the point. These are such wonderful insights. Thank you. Sorry, this is I'm moving back and forth because I set up the PowerPoints, and So video chat via phone. I think video chats are wonderful. They're great. Love them. There's more we can do with them, and they've evolved very quickly. Now, one of the things is that I'm going to offer a suggestion. Not only do people want unpredictability, they're also looking to, what's missing is to go deeper. So there's laughter and humour, which I think is vitally important. But the chance to go deeper into a conversation is important. But so if you do everything by Zoom or Teams or any of the video conferencing tools, then it all becomes a little bit muddled. So I'm going to suggest, especially if you're running teams, is for the formal part, do the video stuff. It is good. And so people feel that they're connected, give them a phone call. We looked at the brain and how the brain processes sound. It retains sound longer. The phone call can be much more intimate. So that's my case. If you keep those separate, I think you will have deeper conversations, which will open up to some maybe some laughter and some cheeky jokes. So very quickly, because so Carol's saying, but we've also seen that if you mix up platforms too much, people take away more about how they engage with the platform than about learning the material. So you have to get good feedback to the right, to get that right, because yes, too much switching between the two can, as Carol says, people talk about the platform. Really, what we want to move along, and I think this is what Carol's getting at, is talking about the communication. So I'm suggesting two platforms. One, video chats for the more formal conversations and more work-orientated. Outside of that, book clubs, etc. But also the phone, just to connect with them on a one-to-one, on a humanistic basis. Does also work if you turn video off and use the audio of the platforms with Teams Zooms rather than the telephone? Yes, I guess so. I've not really tried it, so I can't give a concrete answer on that. Just for the last couple of minutes, a couple of points on how to go a little bit deeper over the telephone. But thank you guys for ever so much for your interaction. If you're going to use telephone for deeper conversation, make sure you've got a good time to talk. Set the tone, ask about the details, stay away from the superficial, go into a little bit detail, not in one go. Give spaces between emotions. Slow down, focus on them, and take risks. And I think we're starting to see more of that where we start to share more of ourselves. Thank you ever so much. We covered a lot in such a short period of time. Do come and visit on the stand. I shall go over to the Pearl Catcher stand and to engage and answer any questions. If you've got any comments or would like to just say hi or tell me a cheeky joke, please do. Thank you ever so much, guys. Have a fabulous